All right, Shabbosai, good morning. Let us begin. Baruch Hashem, a great zechus to be able to learn the daf together in Yerushalayim Yir HaKodesh. Thank our sponsors for this morning's daf. To thank our annual TALMUD TORAH sponsor for Tafshin Pei. Hey, the Tilson Family for dedicating all the Shurman Drushos this year in the zechus of continued besuros tovos for Am Yisroel. To be able to see it. And I was thinking about this a little bit as I was preparing the daf. One of the pesukim that kept just kind of reverberating through my mind is Lulei Sorascha Shashuai Azavadati Ba'ani. Were it not that your Torah gave me delight, I would have perished in my suffering. We're just so overwhelmed by everything that we see unfolding right in front of us, and so overwhelmed by all the circumstances, heartbreaking, difficult circumstances, the loss of the Bibas children, Hashem Yikom Damam, the fact that the body identified wasn't Shiri Bibas, just overwhelming circumstances, and it would be easy for a person to just lose themselves in the abyss of pain. But the incredible thing is that the Ribbon Shalom gave us a Torah. And that Torah is what keeps us tethered. That Torah is what keeps us connected. That Torah is what allows us from falling off, or prevents us from falling off the side of the sheer cliff of nationalistic pain. It's that Torah that keeps us tethered to a sense of optimism, to a sense of hope. It's the Torah that keeps us tethered to the Ribbon Shalom. And it's the Torah. Lulei Sorascha. David HaMelech said, David HaMelech, who suffered so much in his life, says, Ribono Shalom, were it not for your Torah as abadati ba'ani, I would have been lost in my pain. And those words resonate with such profundity for us. Were it not for Sanhedrin, were it not for the daf, were it not for Torah, Ribono Shalom, we too would have been lost in the abyss of pain. Thank you so very much. So both saying, this story, you should just know this daf, thank you so much. Say, this daf, it's like a little bit of like a soothing balm, for the next couple of minutes. When we get to learn Torah together, it's almost as if we could leave everything else on the side. And all we could just do is just immerse ourselves in the Yam Shel TALMUD, immerse ourselves in the sea of Torah, and the Meir Hashem allow its beautiful and holy waters to soothe our soul. So with that, let us begin. Today's daf is Samech Vav. Dedication, yes. So Shir is dedicated by Mel and Karen Ram, Le'ilui Nishmas, Mordechai ben Yitzchak, Yemeretz Hashem, the Neshama should have an Aliyah, and the family in Nechama. Amen. All right, let's begin. A lot to do today. Today's daf is Samech Vav, really exciting daf ahead of us. So I said we left off on Samech Beis, and I want to publicly acknowledge Avi Tobias, who donated these. It might not look like much to you, right? It might not look like much to you, right? I want to make sure the camera on the camera is able to see it also. It's a sticker. Apparently, Avi got fed up with me spending time every single morning trying to figure out where we're up to. So I guess we don't have these in Baltimore. So apparently in New Jersey, it's incredible. They stick and they stay and they're able to show you. So now as a result, I don't spend 14 minutes every single morning trying to figure out where we are. Only 4 minutes when I moved the sticker from yesterday's shir to this morning's shir. So we are picking up. So really, ashkayach to the Tobias Mishpacha on dedicating Post-its, retail value 99 cents. But again, but tremendous shkayach, going to save us a lot of time. So again, we are picking up in Meretz Hashem Rava, which is 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 lines up from the bottom. So we'll say, so the Gemara says as follows: Amar Rava. We'll says this is an incredible Gemara. 9 lines up from the bottom, 65 Sanhedrin Beis. Amar Rava. Ibo tzadiki baru alma. But say, how incredible is this? So Rava says, if tzadikim wanted to, they could create an entire world. Tzadikim are so powerful that if they want to do, they could create. Shnei Amar kavanosechem hayu mavdilin. So I'll say, so this statement, if you take a look at Rashi says over here, Rashi says, first wide line, Ibod Tzadiki, Lios Nikiyim Mikal Avon. So here's what's interesting. What Rabbi seems to be saying is like this. If Tzadikim wanted to, they could create an entire world. Now, how could Tzadikim create an entire world? Because Tzadikim have the ability to cleanse themselves from sin. And once a Yid cleanses himself from sin, then there is no telling what he is able to accomplish. And that's why it's interesting. So, if tzaddikim wanted to create a world, they could do so. Shneimar, ki avonosechem hayu mavdilin. So we'll say, what do you see from here? So there's two things you see from here. Number one, what is the definition of a tzaddik? Right? We speak about this a lot. What's the definition of a tzaddik? So we'll say, so we know, by the way, what's not the definition of a tzaddik? What's not the definition? I know that's a very open-ended question. Right? What was that? A Rasha, excellent. Shkoyach, well done. I will say, by the way, after operating on consistent nights of very little sleep, I've set the bar very low. So really, like pretty much whatever you throw out is going to be fantastic. Rasha, Shkoyach, Abshalom, fantastic. A Navi, right? A Navi. Tzaddik, beautiful. So we'll say, so okay, also, all correct. What you also begin to see, all excellent answers, but not the one I was looking for. And so what I was going to say is, someone who learns a lot of Torah. What do I mean by that? One of the interesting things that we see is that anyone could learn Torah, right? Learning Torah doesn't make you a tzaddik. What learning Torah does is opens up your neshama to all kinds of possibilities. You know what the definition of a tzaddik was? Like Menachem, like Shlomo said before, not a Rasha. True, that's kind of like our baseline. Like Menachem said before, tzaddik is someone who helps others, doesn't just think about himself. Eliyahu a tzaddik. But I think what we also begin to see is a tzaddik is someone who realizes that he has the ability to change. But as we spoke about in yesterday's daf, reality or cognition is never enough. Action. A tzaddik is someone who understands that he has the ability to be a Baal Tshuva. We'll say that's it. Because being a Baal Tshuva means that I recognize I don't have to be the same person. I don't have to remain in place. So I'll say, one of the most incredible things about Yachli Kallah, one of the most incredible things about Eretz Yisrael, is you begin to realize you don't have to remain the same. You could change. Whatever change you want to affect in yourself, whatever change you want to affect in your life, you could do it. So that's what Rav is saying. Rav is saying tzaddikim have the ability to become Baalei Tshuva. And because they have the ability to be Baalei Tshuva, therefore what? Ibo tzadiki bare alma. It will say, once you realize that you have the ability to change, what does that show you? That you have the ability to create worlds. Change is the greatest gift because change says I could create and recreate as many times as necessary. I don't have to live in the same world. I don't have to be the same person. My life doesn't just have to continue consistently on and going forward in the same trajectory. If I want tzaddikim, definition of a tzaddik is a Baal Tshuva, and Rava says tzaddikim realize that they have the ability to create worlds. I will say each of us, if we choose to tap into the power of tshuva, we become tzaddikim, and if we become tzaddikim, we have the ability to create and recreate worlds. Is that not the most incredible thing you've ever heard? I know you might be feeling to yourself, I'm too tired to lift my hand, right? Let alone create a world. I will say, take a deep breath, drink 17 cups of coffee, whatever you have to do, and tap into this, because this is gold. Rava says, tzaddikim. Tzaddikim means, like Rashi says, Baalei Tshuva, have the ability to create and recreate worlds. That's the koach of a yid, to consistently create and recreate. The Gemara goes weiter. Rava, this is great. Rava Baragavra. Rava actually created someone. Rava created a person. We'll say these are by the way, I want to point out the stories of the golem that we see, those stories don't start with the Maharal. You have stories in the Gemara of people, right? So Rava literally Baragavra. He created a person. Look at Rashi. Rashi says over here, Baragavra, al yidei sefer yitzira, shalamdu tziruf osio shel shem. So literally, I'm going to say there's a Sefer Yetzirah, which is a sefer that contains all the secrets of creation. And Rava literally went ahead and he created a person. What happened? Shadrele Kamed Rabbi Zera. He sent the guy, this newly created guy, to Rabbi Zera. Havakamishtay Bahadei. So Rabbi Zera started talking with this person for Lo Havakamahadirle. But ultimately, again, apparently, the person that Rava created wasn't responding. He wasn't engaging in a conversation. Amrle min chavriye at hadal afrach. So Rabbi Zera apparently wasn't happy with him. He said, Rashi says, right? You are someone, right? You are someone who's been created by someone else, right? Get out of here, right? No, go back to your dust. Go back to your dust. So Rabbi say, a profound Gemara, what's the pshat in this? Why did Rabbi Zera go out and send this guy back to the dust? Because remember again, this creation was unable to interact with Rabbi Zera. Rabbi say, if you can't interact with other Yidden, if you don't know how to say a shalom aleichem, if you don't know how to give avas chinam, if you don't know how to give a word of chizik, chazar la'afrecha, go back to the dust. The world doesn't need you. Klal Yisrael doesn't need you if you don't know how to interact and how to be there with the other. Incredible. Rabbi said, listen to this. Rabbi Chanina of Rav Oshia, Haviyasi Kamali Shabsa. Rabbi said, Erev Shabbos Gemara. An Erev Shabbos Gemara. How ridiculous is this? 7.5 year cycle. 7.5 year cycle. Granted, it's yesterday's stuff, but don't get caught up in the details. Right? They'll say, listen to this. So these two Rabbanan, Rabbi Chanina and Rabbi Oshia, were sitting on Erev Shabbos, Va'aski b'Sefer Yitzira. And they were learning Sefer Yitzira. Both said, this is what we're doing during TALMUD. I just want to point out to you, right? So we're going to get a little bit later on. Right? All of Erev Shabbos, they were learning Sefer Yitzira. Umivru luhu igla tilsa. And what did they do? They created for themselves a beautiful igla tilsa. You know, this is always in my chalogis what igla tilsa means. Doesn't mean a third born calf, or doesn't mean a calf that has reached 1/3 of its maturity. Either way, it's supposed to represent like the best meat. It's the best meat, right? The most tender meat. So they created an igla tilsa from Sefer Yitzira, v'achlilei, and they ate it. So what's the point of this, Gemara? What's the point of this? The point is, again, is to show the creative power of tzaddikim. Tzaddikim have the ability to create. But again, I both say, come full circle. What's the definition of a tzaddik? A tzaddik is someone who recognizes that he has the ability to recreate himself. If you realize that you have the ability to be a Baal Tshuva, to create yourself, to recreate yourself, then there is no telling what you could accomplish in this world. Because the most incredible yesod in life is that you could create and recreate yourself as many times as necessary. And that is the hallmark of a tzaddik. Tzaddik recognizes the creative power he possesses and utilizes that to create and recreate himself so many times as necessary. Let's go weiter. So the Gemara says, Tan Rabbanon. So the Gemara says, Ma'onein. So back to sorcery. So what's a Ma'onein? Rabbi Shimon Omer, Zeha Mavir Shiva Mine Zachar Ala Ayin. That's interesting. So this is someone who takes seed from 7 different types of animals and puts it on his eyes. Somehow again, you thought opening your eyes in the Dead Sea was a problem, right? I'm just saying, right? So Lamaisa again puts on his eyes, and apparently that allows him to be able to see things. No, this is someone who engages in deception, right? Like what's the word? Like an illusionist, like a magician, right? Someone who goes ahead and deceives people by making them think that he's engaging in some type of sorcery. Rabbi Kiva says, "Zamachashev itim v'shos." So let's listen to this. This is incredible. Rabbi Kiva says, "Who is the ma'onein?" Ma'onein is someone who believes in auspicious times. Well, what does that mean? Va'omer hayom yafa lotzes. Today is a good day to embark on a journey. Lemachar yafa likach. Tomorrow is a good day for purchases. Limude arvei shvius chitin yafos. Or someone who says, erev Shemitah, that's when the wheat is best. Ikure kitnios miyos raos. So again, what's the pshat? What does Rabbi Akiva say? A ma'onin is someone who feels that certain times are auspicious for different things. So I don't know, why does that sound so bad? Because say, what's the avodah in life? Don't wait for the perfect moment, but make the present moment perfect. See, the ma'onin is someone who believes you got to wait for the right time in order to be able to go ahead and accomplish. There are people like this. There are people who have the most incredible dreams, goals, and aspirations. What are they waiting for? They're waiting just for the right moment. And when's the right moment? Probably now. I don't know when, but it's certainly not now. Certainly not now, right? It may be tomorrow, but tomorrow's cloudy, so probably not tomorrow, right? Sunday sounds good, but Sunday have that thing. I'm pretty sure the right moment is going to come sometime in the next decade. And when that right moment comes, that's when I'm going to pounce on it, right? When that right moment comes, that's when I'm going to make the magic happen. Rabbi Akiva says, we call that? We call that a ma'onein. That's an Isur D'Oraisa. It's an Isur D'Oraisa in life to wait for the right moment. People who wait for the right moment in life to make things happen, you know what they become excellent in? They become proficient in? You know what? In waiting. They become professional waiters. That didn't sound, but you understand, right? Right? They become professional waiters. That's what they do. Spend an entire life waiting to make things happen. Rabbi Akiva says that's called sorcery. That's called ma'onim. Don't wait for the perfect moment. Make the present moment perfect. The Gemara goes weiter. The Gemara says, Tanabanon, Menachish, what's Menachish? So we'll say, so Menachish is a person who believes like in omens. Zeh omer pito nafla miyado, mipiv. Right? The person says, oh, my bread fell out of my mouth. That's a bad omen. Maklo nafla miyado. My staff fell out of my hand. Kori lo me'achorov. Beno kori lo me'achorov. My son called to me from behind me. So these are things that people think like are bad omens. Oriv kori lo. The raven calls out to me. Tzvi hefsiko baderech. A deer ran right in front of me. Nachash miyamino b'shul mismolo. There's a snake on my right and a fox on my left. Now that one may be legitimate, right? In other words, if you have that right? But Lamais again, these are all things that people omenize. Yes, new verb, right? They omenize, an iguana, right? An iguana. Yeah, Yosef and I were at a chuppah together. My first chuppah, life is filled with firsts. About to start a chuppah, an iguana falls out of a tree, right by the chuppah. I'm like, this can't be good. Right? Okay, good. Anyway, right? But it was a new thing. The whole time, I've never had to watch my back for iguanas, but mamish, it happened. Okay, the Gemara goes weiter. You can speak to Yosef for the rest of the story. But all right, so Gemara says as follows. Right, show me a small top of something else. 66a. Al taschil b. Or I will say a person, when they're collecting taxes, a person says to the tax collector, don't start from me. Right? Shachresu, Rosh Chodeshu, Matzeh Shabbesu. Or you know what, again, I don't want to do certain things first thing in the morning. Right? Actually, Rashi points out over here, paying your debts. You know, we'll say, again, these are all people omenizing things. I tell a tax collector, it's not a good simon to start with me. Or I don't want to start off the day by paying my debts. Or again, it's Rosh Chodesh, I don't want to start the new month. Or I don't want to start the new week. Again, a person omenizes all of these things. We don't believe in that. I will say again, halacha l'maisa, the time to accomplish is now. The time to take care of your debts is now. The time to take care of your responsibilities is now. Tarabanon lo sinachashu v'lo sanenu kigon ela menachashim bechulda ba'ofos ubedagim. This refers to people who engage in all types of sorcery and divination. Ultimately, again, with weasels, with birds, and with fish. Okay, they omenize all these different things. Good. We will say Mishnah. Hamechalalas haShabbos, b'davar shechayaven al zadono karis val shigagas chatas. So we'll say in general, when a person violates Shabbos, so again, halacha l'maisa, if a person goes ahead and violates Shabbos, so if something that they went ahead, so again, if you would be chayiv karis, if you were to do so without hasra, then halacha l'maisa you'd be chayiv skila if there was proper meaning for this as well. And again, accidental commission of an aveira ultimately will be chayiv achatos. Tikush the Gemara says mechlal diika midi dichil Shabbos havi vein chayav and Allah shegos achatos shelo as don akaris. So is that to say that there is some type of chil Shabbos that if you were to go ahead and do it unintentionally, that you would not be chayiv for achatos, or you wouldn't be chayiv kares, what would that be? Ma'hi. The Gemara says tchumin v'alibud Rabbi Akiva v'ahavara v'alibud Rabbi Yossi. Okay, so we'll say Rabbi Akiva holds that tchumin are drabanon, and Rabbi Yossi holds that havara, the act of kindling, is lalav yatzasa. Ultimately, it was singled out just to make you chayiv on a lav and not chayiv on kares. Okay, Mishnah. Hamekalol avivi imo eno chayiv at shikalim b'shem. So we've seen this referenced earlier on. If a person curses his parents, he's only chayiv if he curses them with the actual name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Kilalam bekinui, if a person goes ahead and curses his parents with some type of nickname, right, or descriptive name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So what's the halacha? Rabbi Meir says you're chayiv, v'chachamim pochim, but the chachamim say ultimately again that you are pater. Says the Gemara, let's analyze man chachamim, who are the chachamim? Rabbi Nachman, Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Nachman, Rabbi Yossi, Tisanya, Rabbi Nachman, Rabbi Yossi Omer, Benikvo Shem Yumas. The Torah says when you articulate the name of Hashem, right, ultimately one will be put to death. Ma Talmud Lomar. So what is this coming to refer to? So the Gemara says, Ma Talmud Lomar, Shem, Limed Amakalal Avevi Imo, She'eno Chayev At Shekalalem B'Shem. It's coming to teach us that if one curses his parents, one is not chayiv for cursing their parents unless one goes ahead and does so, utilizing the actual name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So Tan Rabbanon, Ish, Ma Talmud Lomer, Ish, what, right, Ma Talmud Lomer, sorry, Ma Talmud Lomer, Ish, L'Rabos Bas Tumtum Va'adrogenous. So interestingly enough, it comes to include that even if one's parent is a tumtum or an androgynous, one might have thought that Allah L'maisa, under those circumstances, you're not chayiv for cursing the parent. Kamash Malan, again, whoever the parent is, one is chayiv for cursing them. Asher yekala les aviv ve'es imo, who will curse his father or his mother. Ein li ela aviv v'imo. So I only know from the pasuk, and from the pasuk, I might have thought that one is only chayiv for cursing mother and father together. Aviv shalo imo. Imo shalo aviv minayin. How do I know that I'm chayiv even for cursing one of my parents? Talmud Lomar aviv v'imo kilel damav bo. Aviv kilel imo kilel div Rabbi Yoshia. Rabbi Yoshia says again, even though it's said as mother and father, we understand it as aviv kilel imo kilel. Cursing one of the parents ultimately makes you chayiv as the Rabbi Yoshia. Rabbi Yonasan says mashma shnein ke'achad. Umashma echa b'fnei atzmo at sheyifrot l'cha kosev yachtav. So the pasuk really gives two inferences. On one hand, the pasuk gives the inference of cursing them both at the same time. The pasuk also goes ahead and seems to indicate that you're chayiv for cursing them individually, and halacha l'maisa in a circumstance like that, you will always be chayiv unless for cursing individually, unless the pasuk says explicitly that you're only chayiv for cursing them together. You must. The Torah says you'll be put to death for cursing your parents. Beskilo, stoning. Ator beskilo ena ela ba'achos min kol misas hamuras b'Torah. So you say stoning. Maybe it's not stoning. Maybe it's one of the other types of death penalties mentioned in the Torah. Ne'amar kon damav bo, v'ne'amar lahalon demehem bam. It says over here, damav bo, and it says later on, by ovi yedoni, actually what we learned before, demehem bam. What do I learn from this? Ma lahalon, just like by ovi yedoni, biskilo, afkan biskilo, so too by cursing one's parents, ultimately skila as well. Says the Gemara, Onesh Shamanu Ashara Minayin. So now I know the punishment of skila. Where do I see the warning? Because remember again, the way it works just biblically is that every death penalty has to have an ashara, a warning, and also the onesh. So now I see the onesh. Where do I see the warning? Talmud Lomar Elokim or Elohim lo sekalel. So which literally again I will say. So we'll see exactly what that pasuk means. Imhaya. So watch this. We'll say first wide line. Imhaya aviv dayan. If one's father was a dayan, the Gemara says Harehu bichlal Elohim lo sekalo. So we'll say. So the way we're understanding right now of Elohim is Elohim refers to a judge. Do not curse a judge. So now the Gemara says this is very interesting. Let's say again. Right, Reuven has a father Yaakov, and Yaakov is a dayan. So if Reuven curses his father, so not only is Reuven chayiv for cursing his father, but he's also chayiv for cursing a judge. V'im haya aviv nasi, and if Reuven's father was a nasi, harahari hu biklal v'nasi ba'amcha lo sar. So we'll say, so interestingly enough, there's a prohibition to curse a dayan. There's a prohibition to curse a leader. So if Reuven's father Yaakov was a dayan, he'd be chayiv for Elohim lo sekalo. If he was the nasi, he'd be chayiv for nasi lo sar. What happens? Eino dayan v'lo nasi minayin. But how do I know that if Reuven cursed his father, and his father is not a dayan, and his father is not the nasi, that Reuven is still going to be chayiv? So the Gemara says, Amrit, both say third wide line, Amrit, so minayin, Amrit, hare ata dan binyan av, mishnehen. So it's like, it's interestingly enough, I could create a paradigm. Binyan av is like a paradigm. What's the paradigm? Here we go. Lo re'i nasi kiri'i dayan. So a nasi is not like a dayan, v'lo re'i dayan kiri'i nasi. And a dayan is not like a nasi. How so? Listen to this. Lo ra'i dayan nasi. Why? Shehari dayan ata mitzuva al hara aso. Kirai nasi she'i ata mitzuva al hara aso. So we'll say the halacha is like this. If a dayan, right? Let's say a judge on a Sanhedrin, issues a ruling, you're obligated to go ahead and adhere to it. And failure to adhere to it can actually result in a death penalty. Interestingly enough, that same halacha doesn't apply to a nasi. Just interesting, right? If you violate the halachic rulings of a nasi, that doesn't necessarily carry with it a death penalty. I'm sorry? Right, great. This week's parsha. Oh, Dr. Alman, shkoyach, incredible. Parshas Mishpatim. Right, Mamish Parshas Mishpatim. Thank you. Lo ri'i nasi kiroi dayan. And on the other hand, again, a nasi is not like a dayan household. Shanasi atam mitzual hamra also kiroi dayan she'atam mitzual haros. So here's what's interesting. See, a nasi and a dayan are two forms of leadership. A dayan is halachic leadership. And therefore, if halacha l'maisa, the dayan issues a halachic ruling, and you violate that, that can result in a death penalty. A nasi is not halachic rulership, and therefore, if a nasi issues a halachic ruling and you violate it, you're not chayiv a death penalty. On the other hand, if a nasi kind of gives like a what's the right word, like a directive, thank you. Like a directive, right? So then again, he's the leader, you gotta follow it. If you violate it, you can be chayiv misa. On the other hand, if a dayan gives a directive, you're not chayiv misa. So two different forms of leadership. Yet, what's the halacha? The Gemara says, Hatzara Shava Shebahin. What's the common denominator between them? Shehin ba'amcha, that they are both members of Klal Yisrael. Va'ata musra al kilalasan. What is the common denominator between a nasi and a dayan? They are both members of Klal Yisrael, and you are not allowed to curse either of them. That's the common denominator. Av ani avi avicha sheba'amcha v'yata musar kilalasa. So you could create a paradigm. What's the paradigm? That any person who is a member of Klal Yisrael, you can't curse. So therefore, again, that includes father, who even if the father is not a dayan, or the father is not a nasi, you still can't curse him. So the Gemara says, and again, remember, this is the azhara. This is where we're looking for the warning. So the Gemara says, Ma la tzara shava shebahen, sheken gidulasan garmer lahen. Why don't you say, on the other hand, maybe the common denominator between nasi and dayan is what? They both occupy exalted positions of leadership. Right? In other words, they both have gidula, they both have greatness. TALMUD lomar lo sekal al cherish. I will say the Torah also says, don't curse the person who is deaf mute. So what do you see from here? Be'umlalim sheba amcha kasam adar. The Torah is talking about even people who are not in elevated positions of greatness. Malachire shekain charishasa garmalo. But maybe a cheresh. Maybe the Torah is telling me that there's a specific din of respecting the cheresh and not cursing the cheresh because he's at a disadvantage. So nasi v'dayin yochichu. Mal nasi v'dayin shekain g'dalasan garmalahan. Cheresh yochiach. V'chazra den lo reizeh kireizeh. V'lo reizeh kireizeh. So we'll say it turns out that really we have three things over here. A nasi, a dayan, and a cheresh. And the truth is, they're really all very dissimilar. What is the common denominator? Zatzara shava shebahen shein ba'amcha va'ata musar al kilalasan. What's the common denominator? Common denominator between a nasi, a dayan, and a cheresh. What's the common denominator? They're all Yidden. They're all Jews. They're all members of Amcha, and you are not allowed to curse them. Af ani avi avicha sheba'amcha v'yata musar al kilalasan. So too, I'll include a father, because the father also is a Yid, also is part of Amcha, and you're not allowed to curse him. Malat sata shava shebahen shekein mishunin. So we'll say, but maybe the sata shava shebahen is that again, nasi, dayan, and cheresh all have some unique difference. Im ke nichtov kra o Elohim v'cheresh o nasi v'cheresh. Elohim lamali. So we'll say, if that's the case, why do I need the Elohim? Im eino inyan legufo tinei in la'aviv. Ultimately, I can also say, if you don't need it for its own interpretation, then use it for fathers. Therefore, we'll say, it turns out that we have a binyan of a paradigm that is really created between nasi, dayan, and cheresh. The common denominator between all those three is that what? That Allah Chalamaysa, again, someone who is amcha, someone who is part of your people, ultimately, you're not allowed to curse. And I will say, what a beautiful and profound yesod. What is the criteria for v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha? Or at least, what is the criteria for not mistreating someone? If they're amcha, if they're a member of Klal Yisrael, you have to love them. It's striking. It was so beautiful. Who just showed me the video? Rabbi Jacob Milner just showed me the video. When the soldier came on the bus, last night when we were leaving Kiryat Arba, right? It was beautiful. Let's say, but what's interesting? So, what is it? What is it that engenders that love? It's simple. See a Jew who's wearing the holy uniform of the Israel Defense Forces, the IDF, and you're like, wow, here's a guy who's Moser Nefesh for Klal Yisrael. So you feel a tremendous sense of Ava. Well, it's important to understand that every Yid wears a uniform, right? And it's the uniform of Tzelem Elokim. It's the uniform of being created in the image of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And every single Jew wears that uniform. And that love that we felt for that precious Chayal yesterday is the love you have to bring for every single Jew. No matter what the actual uniform, the physical uniform looks like, the spiritual uniform is always the same. The spiritual uniform is that every single Yid wears the uniform of Tzelem Hakim, the image of God. And again, because of that, he's Amcho, because that he's a member of Klal Yisrael, and because of that beautiful uniform, therefore, Lo Sar, at least, right? The baseline is, don't curse him. Right? The baseline is, don't mistreat another Jew. The baseline is, don't chas v'shalom engage in negative behavior towards another Jew. Of course, that's where it starts. And Am Yisroel, hopefully we go on from there to the V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha with every single Yid. All right, the Gemara goes by to Hani Chalman Damar Elohim Chol. So by the way, this all works well if you understand that the pasuk Elohim lo sekalel is not Elohim God, but rather again Elohim is referring to a judge. Then I understand that now you could extrapolate, you could even apply it to a father. But according to the opinion that says, no, it's not Elohim, judge, rather what is it? It's Elokim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This is a reference to Hashem. Then what is there to say? The Sanya, Elohim Chol Divrei Rabbi Shmuel. Rabbi Shmuel says Elohim in this pasuk is not God. Elohim refers to a judge. Rabbi Akiva Omer Elokim Kodesh. Rabbi Akiva says no, it refers to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. V'tanya Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov Omer Azhar Levarech Es Hashem Minayin. From where do we see the warning against cursing him of HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Tamal Lomar Elokim Lo Sikalel. To which the Gemara says, Man Domer Elohim Chol. Gamar Kodesh Michol. So the one who says that Elohim in this context is Chol. Chol means it's not God. It's referring to a judge. Then ultimately, again, we can learn out the prohibition to curse HaKadosh Baruch Hu from the prohibition to curse a judge. L'man da'amar Elohim Kodesh Garminan Chol Mikodesh. But the one who says Elohim in this context refers to HaKadosh Baruch Hu is we derive ultimately again the prohibition to curse a judge from the prohibition to curse HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So Bishlam L'man Damar Elohim Chol Gamar Kodesh Michol. So according to the opinion that says Elohim means a judge. So I understand. If you're not allowed to curse a judge, then what? Allah has kama v'kama kol sheken. You're not allowed to curse HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Elamam da'amar Elokim Kodesh Gamar Chol Mikodesh. But according to the one who says Elokim is God, so can you derive that you can't curse a judge from the fact that you can't curse God? To which the Gemara says, Dilma Akodesh Ashar Achol Lo Ishar. Maybe the Torah is only warning us against cursing HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is not warning us against cursing a judge. Imkein lichtov kra lo sakel. If that's the case, the Torah could have just written it in the short form of lo sakel, don't curse. My lo sekalel. Why does it say don't curse Rabosai in the elongated form? Shma mina tarti. It comes to teach us two things. What are the two things? Number one, don't curse a judge. And number two, don't curse HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Beautiful, beautiful. Let's go weiter. Says the Gemara, Haba'a Nara Murasa. So we'll say if a person has relations with a Nara Murasa. So remember again, who's a Nara Murasa? So remember again, Nara is a very specific age. What age? 12 to 12 and a half. So Nara Murasa is a girl who's betrothed, Erisin, right, but not Nisuin. So she's married. Therefore, if a man has relations with another man, has relations with her, that's adultery. What's unique about Nara Murasa is that she is singled out for a unique, or she, when I say she, it's if she was complicit, it's she, and the man who had relations with her are singled out for skila. As opposed to chenek. So Haba Nara Murasa, Eino Chayiv at Sheitei. So I was saying, in order to be Chayiv, ultimately again for Nara Murasa, for skila. Remember, it's a unique punishment, because normally adultery is punished by chenek, strangulation. So here, this is singled out for skila. But in order to fit the criteria of Nara Murasa, in the following criteria. Number one, Eino Chayiv at Sheitei Nara. The girl has to be a Nara. Number two, Besula. Number three, Mu'urasa, Erisin. And number four, Vehi Beves Aviha. And ultimately, again, she's still living in her father's home. So those are the four criteria that you need in order to get the unique punishment of skila for Nara Murasa. Bo ala shnayim, if two men had relations with her, that's consecutively, right? Then what? Harishon b'skila, v'asheni b'chenek. Then the first one is with skila, because remember again, the first one had relations with her, his relations with a besula. The second one who has relations with her, she's no longer a besula, and therefore he's punished in a regular case of adultery by chenek. Okay, so the Gemara goes weiter. Good. So as I said, happens to be over here, Rashi points out that the chiddush over here is the following, that even if the men had relations with her, bia shelo kidarka. So if it's bia shelo kidarka, technically speaking, physiologically, she's still a besula. So you might have thought that physiologically, since she's still a besula, therefore again, halacha l'maisa, maybe even the second guy should get skila. Kamash Shmuel, we know the Torah recognizes two forms of bia. There's bia kidarka and bia shelo kidarka, and they both are legitimate forms of bia. Therefore, again, after the first guy has relations with her, even though physiologically her besulim are intact, she is considered to be a be'ula, and therefore the second guy gets chenek, and ultimately, again, not skila. It's very interesting, and not Shabbos table interesting, but interesting nevertheless. All right, so the Gemara goes weiter. Tan Rabbanon. Nara. Well, right, this is one of these ones. Somebody asks us, so what did you learn today? Just refer to the Moser Haskell from the beginning of the daf. So the Gemara says, Tan Rabbanon. So Nara velo bogeres. The Torah says Nara. So again, now we're going to go through the Pesukim. Nara means a Nara, and not a bogeres. Who's a bogeres? What's a bogeres? Bogeres? 12 and a half years old and above, right? Velo bogeres. Besula. So dafka besula. Velo beula. Again, I just want to point out, remember, even if a woman doesn't conform to these criteria, you're still chayav for adultery. We're talking about the specific prohibition of nara murasa, which carries with it a penalty of skila as opposed to chenek. So in order to be chayav for this again, besula v'lo beula miurasa dafka erisin v'lo nesua beves aviha in her father's home prat l'shemasar ha'av l'shluchei habal. This comes to exclude a case ultimately again where the father had already given her over to the shluchim of the husband. In other words, where she was being given over, right, to be taken to her husband's home. I think Gemara says, good. So good. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Rav. Sutiv Rabbi Meir. These are all the words of Rabbi Meir. Avacham decham say nara murasa afilu kitana b'mashma. The Chum disagree, and the Chacham say that nara murasa could be even what? Nara murasa could even be a kitana. Amar Rav Acham edifti Ravina. Mimai demastis and Rabbi Meir he ulemiute kitana nami. How do you know that our Mishnah is Rabbi Meir and comes to exclude a kitana? According to our Mishnah, a nara murasa is dafka and nara and not a kitana. Tilmo rabbanon he ulemiute bogeres v'sulo. Maybe it's according to the rabbanon, and maybe the point of the Mishnah is to exclude a bogeres for nara murasa. Amar le hay eno chayiv ad she'tei nara v'sula ma'orasa. So the Gemara says, it should have said, in that case, it could have just said, Nara besula murasa, besula midi. The Gemara says nothing more to talk about this. So we've just solidified the fact that, again, the specific and unique punishment for Nara murasa is dafka for a Nara, not a kitana and not a bogeres. Ba ala kitana murasa, Rabbi Meir mahu. What happens? If another man, in other words, not the husband, if another man did have relations with a kitana who's an arusa, what's the halacha in that situation? According to Rabbi Meir, what's the halacha? So the Gemara said, Legamre mamitla, is it saying that it's not adultery at all? Oh, miskila mamitle, or maybe he's just coming to exclude it from skila. So amalei, mistabra miskila mamitle. No, it's still prohibited as adultery. It's just excluded from the prohibition or the punishment of skila. Rather, what will it get? Get chanek instead. The Gemara says, v'haksiv umesu gam shneim ad shiu shneim shavim. But here's the problem: the pasuk when it talks about adultery says umesu gam shneim, they will both die, which seems to indicate to us that there's got to be equality in both of the parties committing adultery. Now, both say if the kitana engages in adultery, what's the halacha? She's not chayaves. Why is she not chayaves? Why? She's kitana. A kitana is not chayaves for anything. So how can you hold the man responsible if the girl is not responsible? So again, Shasik Rav. Rav was silent. He didn't know how to respond to this. Amar Shmuel, might have a Shasik Rav. I don't say Rav, why being silent? The name Alei, Umei Saish Asher Shachavim Malavado. Again, Abba said there's another pasuk. And the other pasuk indicates to us that the man will be executed because he committed adultery. So what do you see from here? There's a case, ultimately, again, where a man is singled out for execution even though the woman is not. What's the case where the man is singled out for execution even if the woman is not? It could be a case of a man who commits adultery with a ketana hameurasa. So again, she's going to be p'tura. Why? She's a ketana, but he's going to be chayiv for that. To which the Gemara says, kitanoi. The reality is, I will say this point is, in fact, a machlokes tanaim. Umesu gam shneim. The pasuk says both of them will be put to death. Bless you. Ad shiyu shneim shabd Rabbi Yoshia. Rabbi Yoshia says, in order to execute a couple for adultery, both of them have to have the same level of liability. And therefore, again, if it's adultery with the kitana, since she's not put to death, he's not put to death either. Rabbi Yonasan says, Umeis ha'ish asher shachabi ma levado. Rabbi Yonasan says, not true. There are sometimes where the man will be executed, even if the woman is not. What will be that case? Kitana mu'urasa. So she's not going to be executed because she's a kitana, right? But lamaisa, he will be because he's an adult. V'idach. What does Rabbi Yoshia do with that? What does he v'idach? What does Rabbi Yonasan do with the pasuk that says Umesugam Shneim, which seems to indicate that again there's got to be an equality in liability between the parties? That comes to exclude, let's say again, an act of intimacy that's not intercourse. So again, it's ma'aseh. Any other form of intimacy that's not intercourse, so halacha ma'aseh, that's not adultery. Again, not good, right? But l'maisa, again, not liable for death penalty if one does that. Ve'idach, ma'aseh chidudim lav klumi. The other part was, of course not. You don't need a pasuk to exclude ma'aseh chidudim, other acts of intimacy that's not intercourse. That's nothing. Halachically, that's not recognized as anything. I don't need a pasuk to exclude that. The Gemara says, ve'idach, hai levado ma'idar shebei. What does the other opinion do with the levado? So kedisanya. Boala Sarah b'nei Adam v'adayin hi besula. So what's the interesting case over here? Let's say again, 10 men have relations with the Nara Murasa, but she's still a besula. So how does that happen? Again, via shalo kedarka. So 10 men have relations with her, but lamaisa, again, she's still a besula. So again, physiologically, her besulim are intact. So now, what is the liability for those men? So the Gemara says, kulan beskila. So the first opinion says, they're all liable to skila. Now we'll say, now why are they all liable to skila? Because the halacha treats it as if all of them had relations with a na'ara hame'urasa. Because since she is still physiologically a besula, there's all chayiv for skila. Rabbi says, no. Harishon beskila, the kulan mechanek. Not true. The first guy is chayiv skila, right? Because he had relations with an Ara Murasa. But again, even though it was Bia Shelo Kedarka, Torah recognizes Bia Shelo Kedarka as a valid form of Bia. Therefore, after that first act, she's no longer Besula. So the rest of the guys are chayiv. What are they chayiv for? Adultery. But they're chayiv for regular adultery. It's just regular adultery, right? So they're chayiv for regular adultery, which is not punishable, again, by skila, only punishable by chenek. Incredible. Ten Rabbanon. Obask ish kohen kisecha lisnos. So the Torah is talking about now again. We spent a significant amount of time speaking about again the bas kohen. So the Torah says, "Obas ish kohen kisecha lisnos esavihi mechaleles ba'ish tisretz." Remember again, we've seen this a unique punishment for a bas kohen, unique punishment for a bas kohen. Ultimately, again, who is executed with sreifa. So the Gemara says, "Obas ish kohen kisecha lisnos." Rabbi says, "Tchilasa." So Rabbi Omer Tchilas. So take a look at Rashi for just a moment. Rashi says over here, right? So Rabbi Omer Kisecha Lashon Tchila Ulakamim Mefarishla. So Rabbi says, Rabbi says Tchila, that her liability is with Tchila. So the Gemara says, what does that mean? Omer Omeisa Isha Sheshach Avima Levado. What is Rabbi saying? Rabbi can be Shmuel Silber. Rabbi holds like Rabbi Shmuel. What does Rabbi Shmuel say? The Amar Arusa Yatsa L'Sreifa V'lo Nesua. So we'll say it is only an Arusa Bas Kohen. We had this machlokes before. It is only an Arusa Bas Kohen, ultimately again who is subject to Sreifa, not a Nesua. Not a Nesua. The Haki Kamar. This is what it means to say. Im Tchilas Bia Biznus B'Sreifa Ve'idach Bechenek. So we'll say, if a bas kohen who's in Arusa has relations with someone, the first man with whom she has relations with, that's the chiyuv sreifa. Any subsequent acts of relations, ultimately again, will be bechenek. So again, what's that case? That's going to be the case of the bishalo kedarka. So the first man who has relations with the bas kohen, the Arusa bas kohen, he's going to be punished by sreifa. The rest of them, even though she's still physiologically a besula, will be treated like regular cases of adultery, and therefore again chenek. So the Gemara says, "My v'chein." What's the v'chein? So the Gemara says, "Ki asam mahasam betchilas bia kamishtaikra." Just like the Torah is talking about over there, initial act of bia. Hachanami betchilas bia mishtamishkra. So to over here, the Torah is talking about an initial act of bia. Amarle Rabibi bar Abaye. Mar lo hachi amar. So the Gemara. So Rabbi said to Abaye, but Abaye, my Rabbi didn't say this. Umanu, whose Rabbi is referring to? Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Meir, right? So Manu, Rabbi Yosef, who didn't say this? Rabbi Yosef. So Rabbi Meir Svirle. Rabbi holds like Rabbi. Da amar niseis leecha min apsulin misasa bechenek. So ultimately, again, because Rabbi holds as follows. So I'll say sahaloch lemaisa. How can you ultimately, again, how can you have, so Rashi points out, take a look at Rashi. Rashi says over here, Rabbi Meir Svirle, Da'amar Bas Kohen, Nesua L'Kasher B'Sreifa, Aval Misis Lecha Min Apsul, and it's supposed to listen to this. Rabbi holds the following. You see about say Rashi is 2 lines up at the bottom of the page. If a Bas Kohen, right, when is there Sreifa by a Bas Kohen Arusa? Only if she is married to a person who is kosher. However, again, but let's say a Bas Kohen is married to a puzzle, to a psul. She's married to a mamzer. So she married to someone who's a puzzle, therefore what? Look at Rashi. Shuv eina ela bechenek, v'aytchila dekama Rabbi Achi kamer. So we'll say Rabbi holds like Rabbi Meir. What does Rabbi Meir say? Rabbi Meir says like this. Rabbi Meir says, when is there a unique punishment for Arusa Bas Kohen? Only when she's married or has erusin to someone who is kosher. But if she didn't need erusin to someone who's pasul, let's say again she married a mamzer, in which case what? She's already quote unquote what? Been profaned. So therefore again the unique punishment of sreifa to a Bas Kohen doesn't apply. So the Gemara says misasa b'chenek, and therefore again it's still adultery, but it's regular adultery, only b'chenek. V'achir is what it means to say, in tchilas achalasa biznos b'sreifa. If halacha l'maisa the first time she was profaned was through the act of adultery, then there's a chi of sreifa. But if technically speaking she was already profaned, how? Through an illegal marriage, then a man who commits adultery with her will only be chayiv chenek, not sreifa. V'idach. So we'll say v'idach, and the other, right, v'idach b'chenek. And again, we'll say ultimately, again, the other case, right, the other person will be chenek, umay v'chein. So we'll say ultimately, again, what's the case of, what's the v'chein? Look at Rashi. Hacha lo kapid el atchilas chilol, v'lo atchilas bia, v'hasam atchilas bia inami kapid. So we'll say, so again, halacha, so what is the v'chein? What is that coming to teach? Tavav samech zayin, simna ba'alma. Ultimately, again, the v'chein by the other case only is simal. What does that mean? Look at Rashi. Ubetchilas shum davar akasam medaber detchilas chilul miha hava. So we'll say, so what it turns out is we have, interestingly enough, according to Rabbi, 2 different cases. In the case, ultimately, again, of Nara, so we'll say, let's kind of bring this together. So, Nara Murasa, by that's the end of the Nara Murasa sugya. So what do we have in Nara Murasa? Torah singles out Nara Murasa for a unique penalty of what? Of skila. Right? A man has relations with an Nara Murasa, a girl betrothed to someone else, skila. Even though what adultery normally carries with it, what? The penalty of chenek. Nara Murasa is unique. But again, has to satisfy all these criteria. Number one, Nara. Number 2, Murasa. Number 3, Beis Aviha. Right? So halacha l'maisa, again, if you have those criteria, then halacha l'maisa, it's skila. Anything else is going to be chenek. What else did we learn? We also learned that halacha l'maisa, if there's an act of bia kidarka, that makes her into a bu'ula. Therefore, if again there are multiple acts of adultery, or let's say an all bia shelo kidarka, the first guy will get skila, subsequent people will get chenek. Interesting enough, the Gemara reverts back now also to Bas Kohen. When is a Bas Kohen chayiv streifa, or her adultery with her chayiv streifa? Only if what? Once again, nara, only if it's erusin, and again, only the first person to have relations with her. So same thing. If there's bia shelo kidarka with a Bas Kohen, so the first guy will be chayiv streifa, subsequent people will be chayiv what? Subsequent people will be chayiv chenek. But interestingly enough, another detail by Bas Kohen that's incredibly important. When is there a din of streifa? Only when what? When that first act is what profaned her. But if she was already profaned, how is she already profaned? Illegal marriage. So she's married to a mamzer. Then halacha l'maisa, the din of shrefa doesn't apply. Rather, it will be treated just like a regular act of adultery and be punishable by chenek. All right, we'll say shkoyach. Shkoyach. What a daf. So we'll say let's breakfast. 9:30. Let's do 9:55. 25 minutes of breakfast. 9:55 back here in the base medrash till 11 o'clock morning. Say the shkoyach. We'll say.